Welcome back. It is always a good day. When I wake up, I give thanks, and I know that today is a day that I am allowed and privileged to introduce you to another, just a lovely, really compassionate, very focused and centered human being. Her name is Jenn Cormier. I'm going to introduce you to Jenn in just a quick second, but first let me do a little bit of housekeeping. I was up in Santa Barbara with a dear friend of mine. Her nickname is actually Santa Barbara because her name is Barbara. So I was a little off my game. And so this morning when I woke up, I'm like, I think I have something to do. And I checked my calendar, and lo and behold, it was the beautiful Reverend Jenn that was going to come on the show. So I love that she is here and she's refreshed and ready to go, because after our very gentle hurricane, she took a 3-hour nap with her cats. And so she's ready to fill us in on all the wonderful things that she has going on. So these are my top cities that are listening. I am so grateful for the downloads. The only way a podcast grows is through downloads and shares and listens. So Burbank, California has come through as a very, very strong market for me. So thank you to Burbank. Palm Desert, always, I think, a nod to my beautiful mother-in-law, Frances, because she's out there spreading the good word about the next room. Corpus Christi, Texas. Drexel Hill, Pennsylvania. Had not seen them before. Santa Barbara is always very supportive. I love Santa Barbara. New Jersey. Houston has been very, very present in the last, I would say, 2 or 3 months. Denver, Colorado. Sydney, Australia, big blue dot where Sydney is, and Stony Plain, Alberta. And that's just my top 10, I guess. So I'm very grateful. Okay, Reverend Jenn Cormier. She is just a lovely lady that I met through the Beautiful Dying Expo years ago. And immediately we just really, it was sort of one of those, my friend Nancy would say, it's like a you moment. Like, oh, I recognize you. I see you. I know who you are. She's got a big, beautiful heart. She has a great Facebook page. It's called Grief and Grace. Her podcast, which I was just fortunate enough to be on recently, is Walk Through Grief with Grace. And her website is walkthroughgriefwithgrace.com. There will be links to everything, so you don't have to go searching right now. So welcome to the show, Reverend Jenn. I'm so happy that you took time to come back on.
Gosh, Jane, I was so excited to sit down with you again. It's always such a pleasure. And there's always something unexpected that you say or I say that feels like a revelation when we get together. So I'm really excited to sit down and see what spirit has to move through us today.
I love that.
Yeah.
So the show is airing. It's shocking that this month went so quickly, but it's airing at the end of the month.
Yeah.
We're in August of 2023. Tell me about what is coming up for you next, because I know that you're unveiling a lot of exciting things, but let's start with what's happening in September.
Yeah. So in September, it's a really special month for me. My dad is really who I tip my invisible hat to for really walking me into the grief work I'm doing, all the work that I'm doing. And his birthday happens to be September 18th. So so the month of September, I really love to offer free events, free masterclasses online, virtually, so that I can reach people around the world to really offer some training around how to move through those heavy moments. You know, when we feel really stuck, when we feel like we can't get up off the floor, you know, how do we move on? So really tips for, you know, how to be in a relationship after you've gone through major loss, you know, with family members, how to function, you know, go through those moments when we're in the first, I like to call it a season of grief, you know, and how to start functioning again. You know, if you're listening to this podcast, you know, kudos to you if you're in that first season of a really, you know, major loss. And I think it's important for us to come together in community. So I really love to offer spaces where people can meet other folks who have gone through different losses, and we can bring the conversation into more of a heart level, into a deeper level than a lot of times we're walking around and it's like, why is everyone just talking about the weather or the hurricane? I
Yeah.
had this major soul moment in my life, and the world is just like revving on this surface level. So that's what it's, the Grief and Grace Facebook group. Actually, someone else has the business page, but it's the Facebook group. It's a private space, and I invite anyone that's listening to join us in that group. I'm going to be beginning again to offer weekly tips every Wednesday in that group. And then you can get all the information on the free trainings I'll be doing over the course of the fall. And I think people that find it, some of them, just kind of sit back and watch what's posted, and I'll get messages from people that I don't even know, and I didn't realize they were in the group, saying, gosh, I'm so grateful that I found this group, because things that you've been saying have so resonated, and I was so glad to see this post or that post. So it's a place where you can feel seen if you want to be seen and heard, but you can also feel understood simply by receiving other people's shares and the support that I offer in the group.
It's lovely. You are taking your training, and here you are, tipping your hat to your dad, whose birthday is September 18th, and offering a place for people to gather. Because you're right, that season of grief, it's difficult when you are on the bathroom floor and you cannot get up.
Yeah.
And people are walking around you discussing little minutia details about the day or what they're having for dinner, and you can't think straight because you've got this fog happening with your grief. So good for you. What's your dad's name?
My dad's name is Gil. Yeah,
Gil.
Gil.
Okay. So here's to you, Gil. We gotta say hello to Gil, because
Yeah.
he's here with us now in the way that I believe. Um, so how lovely. So they just go to the group. It's Grief and Grace. It is a group. It is private, which I love, so that you have to admit them. That way you can kind of have a little bit more, you're not going to get spammed in there. Nobody's
Correct.
going to be hitting you up to read your palm. It's going to be very safe. It's a good place to be able to connect with other people. And, when we are, I guess I want to ask you this. How do you feel that we share our grief? And is it healthy that we have a place to share our deep, dark pain, such as grief?
Yes. I two things come to mind. First, we need to have people that we have really dropped in with, that we trust to share those deeper, darker places. I know that it's, if you go to share that with someone who's not available to receive it. I know I have many people in my life that, we function on more of a surface level. Often people will find that their family members, they can't go deep and dark with them, um, because of family history, or they just don't operate in the same way or think or, you know, feel the same way. So I think it's important to find a community or a mentor or a therapist or, whoever that person or community is that can truly receive you, so that you feel like you can bring your full heart in, whether it feels like it's torn open or it's in 50,000 pieces, or you can bring your bare soul truth, and you can trust that it's going to be held with compassion, with love, with a spaciousness. And that is the space um, I intend to hold, whether it's in my year-long program or it's in a shorter training, because often people just haven't earned that right to receive your whole heart, and all of your pain. And you really want to feel seen and heard and understood and received when you've gone through something really deep.
How long have you been doing this grief work? Because we met years ago, and you were, very involved, and you seem like you have just gotten to a point where you're so comfortable with your skill set that now you really want to help people.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't offer free courses and free advice unless you truly feel the need to share your gift
Yeah.
with those that really need it.
Yeah. It's interesting because it's 2023 now. My father died in 2012, and that was my major grief initiation. I feel like we go through these different life initiations where we just we're a different person once we cross a threshold. And I feel like the threshold of parent death, that's something we talked about in the Grief and Grace group this summer. We had a summer book club and we read The Orphaned Adult. And I feel like the loss of one parent is a particular initiation into a new level of being and your own person. And then there's the loss of a second parent. So when I lost my father, when my father died, that was really an initiation for me. So that's been over 10 years. And but I didn't get right into grief work. After he died, I had my son. I got pregnant about a year after his death, and my I went through a 2-year interfaith, earth-based ministerial program, and I ended up holding space for ceremony, but it was mostly weddings. And I really enjoyed that, bringing families together and blended families, and families that had and I what happened was I ended up working with folks who had death in the family, all kinds of different trauma in the families, and that the wedding was actually a healing event. We think of a wedding just as, people think, oh gosh, you do weddings and grief. They're so different. And I'm like, well, not really. They're both about love and they're both about healing. And what I would find with the weddings, it was like this healing threshold, as love was declared, between one partner and the other partner's children, or things like that. So this is sort of a long way to say that I started really focusing on grief after I had done. We had Jerry Grace Lyons on the Walk Through Grief with Grace podcast. She is a mentor of mine. She's a death doula and has a final passages training where you can learn to be a home funeral guide and help families hold space for their own home funerals. And I learned all of the things about, legal rights I didn't know that I had when my dad died, that you actually have the legal right to your loved one when they die. You don't have to send them off to the funeral right away. You can bring them home. So I started learning about that. I felt very passionate about it. And I considered making home funeral work my main work when we met back in 2019. That was what my intention was. And then COVID happened, and it was not the time for weddings. 2020, it was also not the time for home funerals because families couldn't even be with their loved ones that died, never mind.
Right.
So I just ended up doing lots of service work and speaking and meeting people like you, through the whole year of 2020. And I started the Grief and Grace group, and there was such a need for grief work. And what I realized was, at the beginning, I was like, well, who says I'm qualified to do this particular kind of work? I sort of have that perfectionist, upbringing. Like, I've got to get another training, right? The death doula training and the ministry training was not enough. And then I realized that my background in all the somatic healing that I'd done, all the yoga trainings, 4 yoga trainings, dance, Pilates therapeutics, mindfulness, breath work, all of, theater, visual arts, all of these things were, I could weave together and bring to the beauty that is the healing journey that we go through after grief. And that's really what the crux of it is, Jane, I think, is that I'm really clear now that I'm taking a stand for the fact that going through a grief journey is not something that we need to run from or push away. And when we do, it ends up getting stuck in our tissues. It can turn into addiction or, illness. And if we step forward and say, okay, grief, I'm going to be here with you. Let's collaborate. I'm going to learn from you. I'm going to go through this. What happens is when we let ourselves fall all the way to the depths and the bottom of the ocean, we come back with this new well of energy, with this new life force that opens up for us so that we can live more fully, love more fully, and create in a really beautiful way. Um, Literally, we might be, then that's what I see with all of my clients that go through my year-long program. They're writing, they're painting, they're making dances, they're moving, they're buying new homes and redecorating them. There's all of this creative energy that happens when we go through grief. And it might not seem related, but it really is.
Right. Perfect segue, because I wanted to speak to you about the body or our bodies and how that aligns with grief. Because some people think, oh, it's just grief is this sadness and you have to, work through it and then it's over with. But you really connect with the physical aspect of, how we can deal with deep sadness and loss. So I love what you just said about how it can get stuck, get stuck in the tissues and then manifest in different ways. So let's talk about some tips for shaking out of grief.
Yeah. So
Shifting.
yeah, so actually shaking is one thing that we can do. As a body worker, I worked, many years as, working with people through the Pilates method as a therapeutic method. I worked with a lot of people in pain, lots of back pain, lots of hip pain, lots of fibromyalgia, which is a lot of it's a group of symptoms, right? Where we don't even know, well, the doctors don't know what it is. It's just all of these sort of pain symptoms. So there's lots of body pain that is unexplainable by traditional Western medical doctors. And as I worked with folks, I would recognize, wow, in retrospect, I was doing lots of grief work back 20 years ago. It was bringing breath into the places that were locked down. So, for example, our body, when we're in pain, and there are messages there for us. It has something to tell us. There's a message there, and if we are open to being receptive and listening to the message, we can heal and feel pleasure again and spaciousness again and softness again in those places in our body. So two things. One is breath. So breath is truly life force. It is inspiration. It is what lifts us up. So I have a funny one-line story of Dr. Lewis Melmadrona, who is one of my main teachers and mentors, and actually helped me through that year of grieving my dad. He would say that, I think it was an uncle of his said, everything you need to learn about spirit, you can learn from a dead cat. He said, what do you mean, uncle? And he said, well, a dead cat is heavier than a living cat. Because a living cat, if you weigh a dead cat and a live cat, and it's because the breath actually lifts us up.
Wow.
And we are physically lighter when we are breathing. And what happens when we're in pain, our breath shuts down. We breathe really shallowly. So taking, and we've heard, growing up, I remember my mother would say, oh, take 3 deep breaths, oh, what does that mean? But if we can really take a moment and exhale all of our breath and then feel that breath coming back into our belly, back into our heart, back into our whole being, that will create a new spaciousness within us. So the breath is really a starting point. Everything that I do, I start with the breath in my own practice, with all of my clients and all of my trainings. And it opens us up to being present and not missing what's there, and not getting stuck in our brain. It brings us back into our body. And so much of our suffering lives up in our head. And we think we can get out of suffering by thinking our way out. But really, we need to go from the brain back into our full beingness. And the place to start is our breath.
Mm, this is so good. And I think because it's just such a simplistic part of being a human being, we all breathe.
Yeah.
We're just not always aware of how our breathing affects us. And it's so important. And I know people think it's trite to say, oh, don't forget to breathe. But literally, it is so important in everything to just stop and do some mindful breathing. It just helps everything. It helps our thought process. It helps our sense of humor. It helps our health. It's just so, it's so easy to forget about it, because you're right. We tense up, or if we get angry, it's like we literally hold our breath.
Yeah.
So how lovely. What a great place to start with it. So Grief and Grace, your group on Facebook, let's talk about the immersion program that you're doing, and what does that mean? Because you have a big year program coming up. I believe it launches in October.
Yep. Yep.
Okay, let's talk about that and how you facilitate that and how people could get involved with that. Because if someone's listening right now and they've had a great loss and they just haven't dealt, and life went on, and they go back to work. I owe, off to work I go, and they go back to work, and people just say, hey, welcome back, instead of, how are you?
Yeah.
So let's talk about your program.
Yeah. So, how sorry, is that my computer, Jane?
I
Sorry
think
about that.
that's okay.
I don't know
No
what that is.
worries.
Um, it's spirit saying ding, ding, ding.
I had the same thought. I never, when there's ambient noise or something going on, I'm like, it's a
What is
live
that?
show. It's all good. I don't
Okay.
edit. I just
Yeah.
I let her rip. So
Yeah.
I think it's more real that way, because we're just two women having a discussion, and grief is such an important topic. So
Yeah.
immersion program.
Yeah. So how I see grief, it's really counter culture to go through a grieving healing process, because our
Okay.
culture is so fast, right?
Ah.
Um, we um, we really revere youth and speed, right? And what happens, why we're so like there's such an aversion, I think, to aging and to dying and to grief. It's because, it's not flashy, it's not youthful, um, but there's so much wisdom there, there's so much beauty there. And what grief forces us to slow down. If we have been running 70 miles per hour for years and years, it just drops you, like you said, down on your knees in the bathroom,
Mm-hmm.
in a fetal position on the couch, not being able to get out of bed. And um, the pace just comes to a screeching halt. And it's really hard to reconcile and get back, quote unquote, to my quote unquote normal self, right? After a grieving process, because there's such a big road, right? To go from total inertia to 70 miles an hour, getting back to work. And that's what so many people do. And it's years later they find me and it's like, I never really grieved my mom, and it's been 9 years. Or,
Wow.
my child committed suicide X amount of years ago, and I just took 3 jobs, and I've been carrying around a bag of bricks all this time, and now I've got these health problems, right? So what is important is that we I kind of been joking with some people. It's like, yeah, like the sloth is my totem spirit, or the snail, that we really need to slow down, and that grief really takes a full cycle of the earth. We need to go through a whole year. And so many traditional cultures take a full year to grieve. And that can look a lot of different ways, but we really need to move through all of the seasons. So that's why my program is a year. So it's 4 seasons long. And I really weave in somatic practices, um, and creativity and expression, so that by the end, people are sharing creative works and they feel like they can help other people move through their grief. So, there's then this next level of, oh my gosh, I want to become a sacred grief guide because I want to help other people. I've been through all of this. Um, so I encourage people to just start where you are, come and go through some free training. Just begin. You need to just begin. And if you would like deeper support with community that is long term, I do have that deeper year-long program
Mm,
for you.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is good. I love everything that you're describing because the seasons, um, it's so, so important. And not everyone is going to be there with you. As a matter of fact, no one is usually with you on your grief journey. It is your journey. I describe it a lot of time, not always a favorite, but a familiar sweater that you
Yeah.
pull out of your closet. Maybe it's just you wrap yourself in it. And it still comes back. I mean, you've grieving your dad for over 10 years, and I'm sure you still have your moments when Gil pops in your consciousness, probably very regularly, and you have a moment of sadness. And it's like, it's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay. Like when anybody says, oh, grief, you can get over it. I'm like, are you nuts?
Mhm.
No, no, we can work with it, which is beautiful. It sounds like exactly what you're doing. When we were off microphone, you had mentioned Mexico. What
Yeah.
is going on there? What are you doing?
Yeah. So this actually ties into the story of Gil. My dad, I'll tell you this very quick story.
Oh, you
Um,
don't have to be quick. I love a
yeah,
good Gil
or
story.
a love, yeah, or a longer Gil story. But so my dad, when he was going through his, originally he thought it was like a battle with cancer, which I hear a lot of people
Mm,
battling cancer,
fighting. Yeah.
fighting,
Yes.
right? And he said, Jen, this is all just doom and gloom. Every time I open this cancer file, it's just doom and gloom. He was doing all the research, looking into all the numbers, all the science. And I said, Dad, why don't you change that cancer file to a healing file?
Mm.
And he did. He was like, I like that. He whipped out some white out, and that was a turning point in his cancer journey. And changed it. He changed the narrative, and he said, I'm on a healing journey.
Mm.
So it was no longer battling cancer from that day on. It was, a healing file. And I got to be sort of a midwife, to a wing woman to my dad on his healing journey. Um, his first diagnosis said he had 3 months to live. He ended up living for 3 years.
Mm.
The last year of his life, where, I was always hoping for a miracle. And he
Sure.
did outlive. And he was not cured, but he did so much healing in his life. You could see at this point in 2012, the beginning of 2012, tumors in his neck and in his belly. And he felt really called to this sacred site in Mexico. There are pyramids in Mexico, ancient pyramids that are pre-Aztec. They're called the Teotihuacan pyramids, and they were believed to be built by the Teotihuacano, that the Aztec found. And it's just this brilliant energy. There are a whole group of pyramids. There's a pyramid that they call the Pyramid of the Sun, the Pyramid of the Moon. There's a site where there's a pyramid of Quetzalcoatl, the winged serpent. And my dad felt called to go to these pyramids. So I went with him, and I got to go to support him. And at the time, you can't, since COVID, climb the Pyramid of the Sun, but at the time you could. And there was another woman. They were both moving through stage 4 cancer. They both climbed. We all helped them. They both climbed all the way to the top of this pyramid.
Mm.
And it was a magical retreat. And that was the last trip that my dad took in February of 2012. So fast forward to 2022, my passport expires. And I have an 8-year-old son now, and I have traveled with him cross country, but I didn't do any international travel in 10 years. That was the last trip I took, was to Mexico City with my dad and the Teotihuacan pyramids. I said, well, I got to renew my passport. And I thought, oh my gosh, I'd like to take my clients to this sacred site. And I reached out to Emily and Victor, they have a family retreat center. And I'd stayed in touch for 11 years. And I wanted to bring a group. And what ended up happening was the energy wanted me to go for myself. So I did a solo journey for my own healing. And it was a mystical mother retreat, and it was a painting retreat. So I got to go and paint this mystical mother painting, and go on my own healing journey and receive my own healing on the 10th anniversary of my dad's death. I went in November 2022. And that was the first year anniversary of the podcast. It was the 10th year of my dad's death. There was a huge party and fireworks on the anniversary of his death. It also happened to be the 60th birthday of Alberto. So there was 3 bands and fireworks, and it was just incredible. So I did so much healing for myself, for my Catholic lineage. I went to the Basilica of the Divine Mother in Tepeyac Hill, where the great mother Tonantzin, who the Spaniards called the Guadalupe, came down on this hill as a vision, and that created, I mean, that's just a mythical story that created so much healing. I got to go to that sacred site, and I received my own healing with the masculine, and just coming out of the patriarchy of the church institution, because my family lineage is Catholic. So anyway, there's just all kinds. I could go on and on for an hour about that. But what was in the cards was, no, I needed to go for myself the second time. And then the third time, a year later, I could bring pilgrims, clients, folks who are wanting to go on a healing journey and a quest to really let go of the heaviness of their experience and really reclaim joy in their life. So that's what this retreat is coming up in November. It's November 12th to the 18th. It's a week-long, all-inclusive retreat to the pyramids in Teotihuacan, and we will go to the Basilica in Mexico City and visit the Divine Mother. We'll be doing rebirthing ceremony in sacred caves underground, underneath the pyramids. There's an optional hot air balloon ride that was like the ride of my life. So I'm really excited about this retreat coming up.
Wow.
Yeah.
Jenn, that just sounds so amazing. And I have so many things swirling, but I love that your dad made a pivot to stop fighting and battling and decided to call it healing. And people say, well, yeah, but he still died. But no, the healing, if we're fortunate enough and we're aware enough and have the presence of mind, we can heal every day we're here, and how lovely is that? So that when we do transition and transcend to the next room, our journey is joyous and we've done the work, right?
Yep.
Your dad did his work.
He sure
wow,
did.
that is just beautiful, beautiful. Please don't forget to send me the link for that. I have a feeling that there could be many people that were unaware of this. And through my audience, I think you're going to get some people, if not going with you in November, wanting to know about the following year as well. So, Reverend Jenn Cormier, wow. Her Facebook group is Grief and Grace. Please go on there, click on it. She'll admit you. Her podcast is Walk Through Grief with Grace. Please go sign up for it so it drops in, because that's how a podcast grows. I'm always very supportive of other podcasts. Don't always get a lot of chance to listen to them. Even when I'm interviewed, I'm like, oh my gosh, it takes time. But, a mindful walk through the neighborhood while you're listening to a podcast is a good thing. And then, of course, her website, if you want to connect with her further, you want to ask her questions, you want to work with her, you want to take her year-long immersion program, or go down to Mexico with her the 12th through the 18th of November, walkthroughgriefwithgrace.com. Okay, Jenn, final thoughts before we say goodbye for today.
Final thoughts. I think the key is really to be as gentle as you can be with yourself. The day-to-day healing for me is when I can soften around those hard places. I have 2 new rescue cats, and you mentioned at the beginning that I took a 3-hour nap with them, and there's nothing like 2 snuggly napping cats to teach you how to be soft in life. So any way that you can soften, whether that's going on a retreat to a sacred land and being held by, a community of people and healers, and, having the spaciousness to paint and write and go on retreat. If that's what brings you softness, go. If what brings you softness is taking a nap today, take a nap, hop in a hammock, do what you need to do for yourself. The first thing that pops to mind, to be soft. And that's a way that you can really be compassionate and gentle with yourself. And if we do that a little bit every day, that is how we begin the road to healing.
Beautiful. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for listening to The Next Room. My guest, the beautiful and lovely Reverend Jenn Cormier, Grief and Grace. And it's also Walk Through Grief with Grace. Find her, connect with her, as you have been hearing for the past 40 minutes or so. She's a very soft and gentle soul. So thanks again for tuning in to The Next Room. If you can be anything at all, you have a choice. Please be kind. Thank you again for tuning in and listening and watching.